الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So today inshallah we'll continue our lesson in covering the book Al-Mulaqis Al-Fiqhi by Shaykh Salih Fawzan, and today we'll be starting discussion regarding Bab fi Sujud At-Tilawa. So the new chapter that the Shaykh that the author Hafidullah will be discussing is the chapter relating to matters concerning Salah, and the matters that you mentioned, Bab, the chapter relating to Sujud At-Tilawa. So regarding concerning when a person is to read the Quran, what are some of the rules that one should be mindful of. So regarding this particular matter that you mentioned concerning the chapter heading concerning Bab fi Sujud At-Tilawa, so concerning the prostration of reciting of the Quran, and different ulama who may can somewhat use a different heading. So in other words, Sujud At-Tilawa, that they'll use concerning the heading of Sujud Al-Quran, Sujud Al-Quran. So that's concerning like the example of Bukhari and also at Tirmidhi, they use more so Sujud Al-Quran rather than Sujud At-Tilawa. So inshallah we'll read the book and then we'll comment on some of the points that are mentioned by the author.
Bismillah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih, qala ma'alis hafizahullah. Chapter 16, Prostration of Recitation. The prostration of recitation is one of the prophetic practices, and it is thus called as it relates to the recitation of the Quran. It is an act of worship that is ordained by Allah and His Messenger to be done when reciting the verses of the Quran or listening to them, as a means of drawing near to Allah, subjecting oneself to His Majesty, and showing submissiveness to Him.
So the author Hafidullah, that he started this particular discussion regarding an open discussion regarding Bab fi Sujud At-Tilawa. Then he mentioned concerning min sunan as-sujud At-Tilawa, of those things concerning of the sunan, concerning of those things that the Prophet Islam have established regarding concerning if the person was to read certain parts of the Quran or certain verses, then one should observe the rule of Sujud At-Tilawa. And we'll discuss the ahkam that relates to this particular topic. So the first of those things to discuss is give a clarity regarding what is meant by Sujud Tilawa by way of the definition mentioned by some of the ulama. Of those ulama of defining Sujud Tilawa, that they mention that what is meant by this, the definition that they have given, that they mention وَضَى الْأَعْضَاءِ السَّبْعَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ تَعَبُّدًا لِلَّهِ, that Sujud Tilawa is for the person to prostrate the 7 limbs upon the earth, ta'abbudan lillah, as a form of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the qira' aw sama ayat shuri'a sujud indaha. So it is so again concerning that is placing those 7 limbs of the body upon the earth as a form of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while reciting or listening certain verses that it is legislated for one to prostrate. So that's concerning the definition of what is Sujud At-Tilawa. So meaning that the person has to prostrate, and he mentioned those a'dha, those particular limbs to be mentioned later as a form of ta'abbudan. So Sujud At-Tilawa is a form of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether the person have read the Quran or reading the Quran, or reciting the Quran, or the person is listening to the Quran of certain portion that mention these verses of Sujud At-Tilawa. So that's concerning what is meant by Sujud At-Tilawa. That meaning that there's place in the Quran that prostration is required or commanded or instructed. If the person was to read those verses, then the person should make sujood, and we'll mention those places later in the discussion or in the lesson. So that's concerning that matter. Then after the thing the Shaykh mentioned concerning that, so it is sujood tilawa, it's a sujood more so linked related to if certain verses are read, if particular verses are read. So it is a reason to prostrate is because the person have read particular places or certain verses in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's concerning the matter that he discussed regarding this matter. And so then we go to the matter he discussed next.
This act of prostration is enacted as an act of the Sunnah, prophetic traditions, for both the one who recites it and the one who listens to the Quran. Scholars unanimously agree on its legality. Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, radiallahu anhu, said, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited a surah of the Quran that contains a prostration, he would prostrate, and we would do the same. And some of us, because of the heavy rush, could not find a place of prostration, related by Al-Bukhari and Muslim.
A surah discussed concerning of those matters that relates to sujood al-tilawa, of the sujood of recitation, that often mention that regarding concerning the hukum. So what's the hukum? So you mentioned concerning that it is something which is sunnah, sujood al-tilawa lil-qari wal-mustama. So you mentioned that as for the ruling pertaining to sujood al-tilawa, that it is something which is a sunnah, mustahab, to be performed for the person who recite the Quran, the read of the Quran, and also second, the person who is the listener of the one reciting. That I mentioned, فَقَدْ أَجْمَعَ الْعُلَمَاء عَلَى مَشْرُوعِيَّتِ. That also mentioned is an agreement between the ulama regarding the permissibility and the legality of performing this act. And this is based upon the numerous ayat that discuss concerning sujood at certain parts in the Quran, and also many hadith that discuss concerning that regarding this matter, and also that of the Sahaba. As for concerning the hukum, regarding hukum sujood tilawa, we'll explain in a way concerning that. We'll consider three groups of people. First, the qari, atali, the one who's reading, reciting, the rule that applies to him. Then also second group of people we discuss concerning al-mustama, the person who's listening, the person who's paying attention and listening to someone else who's reading. And then we have third, the person who's mentioned as-sama, the one who have heard it, overhear someone reading, but he's not paying attention. What's the ruling pertaining to those three groups of people? So as for the first, which is concerning the person who's the al-qari, what's the hukum regarding the person who's reciting the Quran? What's the ruling regarding if he was to read these verses of tilawa? What's expected from him? What's the ruling to be done? What is to be done in that case? There's a khilaf between the ulama on this matter regarding the person who's reciting. Of the ulama who take the position that it is wajib for a person who recite the Quran, whether he's in salat or outside salat, that he must make this sujood tilawa. So the first view, it is wajib, mutlaqa, whether in salat or outside salat. If one recite these verses of tilawa, of sujood tilawa, one must prostrate. And that's the view taken by Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and also riwayah and Imam Ahmed, also a view taken by Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. So Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, of those who all view it is wajib for the qari that he must prostrate, whether he's in the salat or outside the salat. And they have dalil that they use that concern those ayat that mention regarding when the sujood is mentioned, that it commands a person to make sujood, fasjud. So they mention that from that it shows that it is something which is wajib to be done. And other adillah that they use to come to their conclusion. The second view is the view of the ulama all, that it is wajib. The second view is regarding concern a person, the qari, wajib fi salah. It is wajib for a person to prostrate in the salah. Mustahab, masnoon, kharij salat. And it is mustahab for him to do so outside salah. So for the person who's reciting, the second view is that the person, if he's in the salah, it is a must for him to prostrate. If the person is reciting outside the salah, then it is not, it is mustahab for him to recite. And that is the view also taken by Imam Ahmed of another narration on Imam Ahmed, another narration on Imam Ahmed. That's the second view. The third view on this matter is those of the ulama who take the position that it is sunnah mutlaqa regarding lil qari, that it is sunnah mustahab that the person who recite the Quran and the verses of sujood tilawa, that it is something which is mustahab for them, it is preferred for them to do, so either recommended for them to make a sujood, whether in the salat or outside the salah. So that's concerning the person who's the reciter. And that's the view of the jumhur of the ulama. Of them concerning Malikiyya wa Shafi'iyya, and also a narration Imam Ahmed, and also the madhab of the Hanabila, that's the madhab of the Hanabila, and also the view of the Zahiriyya, Layth ibn Sa'd, Awzahi, Ishaq, Abu Thawr, and others. So majority of the ulama, jumhur, is of the view that it is mustahab, that the person prostrate, who is the reciter, he prostrate whether in the salat or outside the salah. That's concerning that matter. As for qawl tarjih, based upon all is mentioned, Allahu alam, that they mentioned concerning the al-qawl thalith. So the third view is the view that is more correct, that it is something which is mustahab for a person to prostrate when they have read those verses of tilawa, whether in the salat or outside, but it's not wajib. It's not the degree of wajib to the extent of wajib, but rather it is mustahab. That's concerning, as we mentioned, first person is the reciter. And the second is concerning the person who is the mustama', the one who, they say mustama', the person who listens, hear the Quran being read, ansata, and also is somewhat of giving attention, and also is following concerning that recital. So the person who is like, he wants to listen and giving attention to listen to the Quran read by someone else. So he's the mustama', he's listening to someone else reads. As for this person, they mentioned that again a khilaf between the ulama regarding what is to be done by him in qawlain. The first view, that is wajib upon him also. It is wajib as the person who is the listener and giving attention, the rule that applies to the qari then applies to him. So it becomes wajib upon him. And that's a view taken by the Hanafiya, and also a narration and Imam Ahmed rahimahullah, and also again a view of Ibn Taymiyyah. So regarding again those views that they all concern al-mustama', the same applies as the qari, and that's the first view. And they mention that of the reason of they come to the conclusion that you have those verses that mention about sujood tilawa that is mentioned, that there's an amr, awamir, so kind of somewhat a command that you should prostrate, or in those verses that is somewhat dhanb man tarak as-sujood, or in cases where the person is being said to be blameworthy because of not prostrating. So they mention it is wajib. Then that's concerned the first view. The second view regarding the person who is the listener and given attention, then that they mention that the second view it is also mustahab for that person to prostrate in general. And that's the view taken by the jumhur of the ulama, al-Malikiyya wa Shafi'iyya, and also another narration, Imam Ahmed. And Allahu Alam also, that the second view concerned that, as to be mentioned, that as the Shaykh and the Hubi come, that also that second view, that also it's also the correct view, that it is mustahab. Based upon the sunnah, we'll find cases where the Prophet ﷺ prostrated and time that he didn't prostrate. Right? So based upon that, it shows that, yes, the ayat may prove that it's something which is wajib, but the sunnah decrease or lessen the ruling to that of being something which is sunnah mustahab. As for the third person, is regarding lisama, the hukum regarding asama, the person who overhears, use the word, the person is hear the Quran, but he's not given attention. He's not per se there to listen, but kind of somewhat by somewhat overhear the Quran being read. What's the ruling pertaining to that person? What is expected from him? They mention concern as for this person, also concerned that those who hold that for this person also it is wajib upon them to make sujood tilawa. And this is a view taken by Imam Abu Hanifa or the Hanafiya, or that the person who overhears the Quran, also that person is to make sujood tilawa. And because they mentioned that the evidence that mentioned comes for the other two groups also apply to this person without any difference. So there's no distinction between that person who's the one who's the reader, that person who is the listener, and that person who overhears the Quran. All of them share hearing the Quran. are the verses regarding tilawat sujud tilawa. That's concerning their approach on the matter. The second view is that it's something also sunnah mustahab. And that's a view taken by the Shafi'iyah, the Hanabila, in one of their view. And Ibn Qudama rahimahullah of the Hanabila takes that the position that mentions the view of Ibn Umar amongst the Sahaba, and Nakhai, Sa'id ibn Jubair, and Nafi, and others. So they mentioned that that person's intention is not to, it is something which is that the rules still apply to him as being one who's a listener or hearing the Quran, so that rule generally still applies to him. So it is something which is, in his case, a sunnah to do so, but not to the extent of being wajib. The third view is the view that all concerning annahu, they mentioned that it is something which is preferred to be done, but not something which is, if the person was not to do it, then that is okay. It is something which they mention it is better to do so, but if left, is not a problem. That's the general view of that view, and that's the view of taken by some of the Shafi'iyah. So they mentioned that it is something which is mustahab, preferred to be done by that person who overhears the Quran, وَلَا يَتَأَكَّدْ فِي حَقِّهِ, but it's not something which is emphasized regarding that upon that person. As in the case of the one who listens and give attention. Then you have the fourth view on this matter, is that the fourth view, all that, it is not mashru' for that person to make sujood tilawa. So the fourth view is that in the case of that person who overhears the Quran, that person is not to make sujood tilawa. And they mentioned that that's the view taken by the Malikiyah, and also a view of the Shafi'iyah, and also is the method of the Hanabila. It's the view of the Hanabila that the person who overhears the Quran and not paying attention, giving attention, then that person is not for them to make sujood tilawa. So those are the aqwal of the ulama regarding that matter. And Allahu alam, that concerning the third view, that regarding that of some of the Shafi'iyah, if the person was to prostrate, that's okay, preferred. But if the person was not to do so, then is okay. Then there's no harm upon them. So that's concerning, as we mentioned, regarding, as the Shaykh mentioned, yusun sujood tilawa lil qari wal mustama'. So it said, as for the ahkam related to the hukum, then it applies to those three group of people: the qari, the person who's reciting. I will mention the aqwal of the ulama, and that the qawl al-raja, the more correct view is that in that person's case, it is not wajib, but rather it is mustahab, whether the person is in salat or outside salah. As for the person who is listening and paying attention and following the Quran of the reciter read by someone else, then that person also, it is mustahab in their case also to make sujood tilawa. And we mentioned the third group, the scenario is the person who overhears someone reading the Quran and they're somewhat doing their own thing, engage in other things, but not per se focus on listening to the Quran. That person, then it is in their case also mustahab, but not in that same way of emphasis on their case. But if do so, then that's better. So that's concerning the aqwal regarding those matter. Also to note that regarding concerning sujood tilawa, it applies regarding concerning salat al-farida, and also salat and nafila. If the person was to read those verses that mention sujood tilawa, then the person is to prostrate. This rule apply in the farida, the compulsory salat, the nafila salat, where the person is the imam or munfarid or the ones behind. So these rules apply regarding the salat, and also regarding the applies to the person who's outside reading the Quran. The person also that is there reading the Quran outside salah, intending the recitation of the Quran. Aywa. So we now continue on.
Imam Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, the great scholar, may Allah have mercy on him, said, positions of prostration are what is reported to us and what is commanded for us to do. That is, Allah tells us about the prostration of His creatures generally, or at specific situations. So it is enacted for the one who recites the Quran and the one who listens to it to act like them, Allah's creatures, when reciting or listening to the verses of prostration. And with the greater reason, the verses that actually command prostrating. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, narrated as a marfu', traceable hadith, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when the son of Adam recites a verse of prostration and then falls down in prostration, Satan goes into seclusion weeping and saying, woe unto me. The son of Adam is commanded to prostrate and he has prostrated. So paradise is entitled to him. And I have commanded to prostrate, and I was commanded to prostrate, but I refused. So I am doomed to hell.
Hey.
Related by Muslim and Ibn Majah.
So that hadith that is mentioned by the author Hafidullah regarding concerning of those matters relating to sujood tilawa, of the evidence that this hadith is used by different those who say it is wajib and also those who say it is mustahab. So I mentioned concerning hadith, I mentioned إذا قرأ ابن آدم السجدة فسجد, that if the sons of Adam that they read a sajda, that they make the sujood, then Iblis that itazal al-shaytan yabki, and the shaitan is somewhat goes away and he cries. فيقول, and then he says concerning يا ويله, that against him, أمر ابن آدم بالسجود فسجد, that the children of Adam that they commanded to make a sujood and they prostrate. So actually it's not that فَلَهُ جَنَّةٌ, so the reward for that person is Jannah. This shows concern again, also it shows the virtue of sujood tilawa. Nam, but also of those who mention Umira ibn Adam bis sujud fasajad, that they are commanded and they to make sujood and they do so. And for them, فَلَهُ جَنَّةٌ, and for them is al-Jannah. So it shows the great virtue of the person who comply with this command of as-sujood. And that Iblis and that shaitan that was dismissed based upon him refusing to make a sujood. Then I mentioned, وَأُمْرِتُ بِالسُّجُودِ, I was commanded with sujood, فَأَبَيْتُ فَلِي النَّارِ, and that I was commanded with sujood and I refuse, and for me is an-nar. And I mentioned hadith in the Sahih Muslim wa Ibn Majah. Then he mentioned concerning the virtue of the adillah used regarding whether it is wajib or mustahab. As though it is mustahab, this hadith per se is regarding hikayah, that is considered a khabar, is like informing regarding the event that occurred between Adam or Iblis. But as for concern the ruling regarding it's a must, then that goes back to regarding a must to prostrate, that requires other dalil to prove it is a must to do so. And other adillah to be mentioned that prove that it is not the case. Aywa.
قال مؤلف رحمه حفظه الله, the prostration of recitation should be performed by both the one reciting and the one listening to the Quran.
Pause. The author rahimahullah can I mention that it is mashru' for a person who recite and also for a person who listen, because concern said that this book is regarding an explanation of a matin of the Hanbali fiqh. So kind of somewhat is falling in line or mentioning concerning the view of the Hanabila, which as we mentioned before, that the Hanabila all concerning that it is something which is a mashru', mustahab for a person regarding the reader and the listener, attentive listener, that they make sujood tilawa. And he didn't mention concerning, and then you mentioned concerning, so that's concerning fall in line with their position and their view. Aywa.
What is stated in the previously mentioned hadith of Ibn Umar, namely when the Prophet ﷺ recited a surah of the Quran that contains the prostration, he would prostrate and we would do the same.
So it shows concerning the continue.
Proves the legality of the prostration of the one who is listening.
So that's concerning the evidence regarding concerning of the evidence regarding concerning the one who reads and also the one who listens. That he mentioned Nabi alayhi salam يقرأ علينا سورة فيها السجدة فيسجد. So that's concerning that's the person who's the reciter. So that's the evidence regarding proof that the reciter he may prostrate. They mention nasjud ma'ahu, and we also those who are listening, those who are with him, that they also made sujood. So it proves the dalil, evidence for both the reciter and also for those who are listening, to the reciter. Aywa. And that applies to whether the person is in the salat and also the person outside the salah. In the salat and also outside the salah.
قال مؤلف حفظه الله.
Before of some of the points that they mentioned that regarding concerning of the masail that also comes from this, that they discuss concerning that regarding concerning the person who, as he mentioned, the reciter and the one listening, that the same rule applies generally to them, that also to make a distinction that, and this regarding concerning the salat and outside the salat. As for in the salat, then it becomes of if in the salat and outside, if the person in the salat, the imam reads and make prostration, everyone must follow him. So those concerned, the ones who are listening, if the imam in the salat was to read sujood tilawa and he prostrate, that becomes upon those behind, praying behind the imam also for them to follow along with him as they are to follow the imam. So in that case, it becomes wajib upon those behind. If the imam was to prostrate, becomes wajib upon them to follow. That's the view of the jumhur of the ulama, even though some, that's not the case, but it is wajib upon them to follow behind the imam. So overall, of the things that they mentioned, that someone mentioned is that ijma' ala ilzam al-mustama' idha sajada al-qari an yasjud. That it is wajib upon the person who is listening to the reciter, that if the reciter himself prostrate, then you have to prostrate, whether in the salat or outside the salah. So this applies because so the person who is the reciter, if he's reciting and he decide to prostrate, then those who are listening, then also becomes upon them to follow him. As mentioned, that some mention is that ijma on that matter, some mention it is mustahab, but in general, that they mention that one has to follow the imam, more so in the salat, even more so, it becomes wajib. Also of the matter, they mention that if la yushra, it is not allowed with some of the ulama, that if the person who the reciter was to read and he did not make sujood tilawa, he decided not to make sujood tilawa, but the person who's listening or the person in the salat, what should they do? So the first scenario, the person in the salat and the imam read a ayah from sujood tilawa and did not prostrate, then one should not prostrate. That's in the salah. So if the imam did not make the prostration, then those behind should not make the prostration because he didn't do so. The second scenario, if the qari is outside salah and he read a ayah of sujood tilawa and he did not prostrate, but there are those who are listening to him, are they to, what should they prostrate on their own or not? And also in that case, they are not to prostrate, even though the khilaf between the ulama, but the qawl al-rajih, that also in that scenario, they are not to prostrate. They are not to prostrate. So they kind of somewhat, they follow along behind the imam. So that's concerning when to prostrate and when not to prostrate. Another matter regarding concern the qari and those who is listening, those who are paying attention, listen to the qari who's reciting, that if we make sujood tilawa outside salah, this is now outside salah, or first in salah. In the salah, then you follow him as you will normally follow him. So when he goes down, you go after him. That's the you. When he rise, you rise after him, or come back to his standing position. That's within the salah. As I mentioned, that the imam is to be followed. That's within the salat. But in the second scenario, if the imam is outside salah, or not the imam, sorry, the qari is reciting outside salah, and there are those who are listening. And so in those scenarios, if he prostrate, you prostrate after him. So you should not proceed in prostrating before him. You wait until he prostrate, then you go after him. But as for him coming up, then you can do so before him. You can come back or rise from sujood after him outside salat, but you shouldn't do so before him but you are allowed to do so after him. As I mentioned, that difference in that era is not haqiqah to salat in a complete sense. So you can come back, you can rise before him, but you should not prostrate before him. So that's concerning some of those matters that are discussed. Others that will discuss relating to that matter. You mentioned, okay, we'll discuss some. Another point, أيوة, the next point that he mentions, أيوة, أما سامع.
قال المؤلف حفظه الله. As for the hearer, i.e. the one who is not attentively listening, it is not obligatory upon him to perform the prostration of recitation. Al-Bukhari related, Uthman radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, passed by a reciter who recited a verse involving prostration to make Uthman perform prostration along with him. But Uthman did not perform prostration and said, the prostration should be performed by him who listens to it.
Yes, that's of the evidence regarding from the Sahaba, of Uthman ibn Affan and others regarding concerning that, concerning Amma Sama, that he mentioned, الذي لم يقصد الاستماع, that the one who doesn't intend to listen attentively to the Quran, that for him the rules concerning sujood tilawah does not apply. As the Shaykh highlighted here, as that's the view taken by the Hanabila. And we mentioned there's others, we discussed the aqwal of the ulama pertaining to that topic. So that's concerning those matters. Before we go into what you mentioned concerning mawadi al-sujud tilawa, some other points that we'll mention or add regarding that we think may be relevant to the topic that is not mentioned. Of those that we'll mention concerning that, one, regarding sujud tilawa. Regarding sujud tilawa, that the ulama have mentioned that in the Quran, that as mentioned by Ibn Hazm rahimahullah, that there's no more than 15 places in the Quran where sujood is mentioned. 15 places in the Quran that mentioned regarding as-sujud, at-tilawa, where the person is expected to make sujood. So 15 places in the Quran where the person is expected to make sujood upon reading the Quran. In the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala, that will bring concerning of the sign that in our Quran, the Musaf today, you have certain places, that the places where sujood tilawa is mentioned, that now we have two main signs in the Quran. As we mentioned, they have put certain signs in the Quran that a person to let the person know that it's at this place want to make sujood tilawa. We show those signs in the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala. So as for those places mentioned, there's 15 places in the Quran that mention about sujood tilawa that expected for the person to make sujood. Between the ulamas, we'll discuss that you have also a difference regarding concern of those places, that you'll find that of those places where some hold that 15 places mentioned, some more inclined that sujood tilawa is for 15 places, some inclined that it is actually 14 places, and some mention of what is mentioned is actually 11 places. And we'll mention that in the later. So as for other matters pertaining to this matter concerning sujood of tilawa, that one of the ulama, and I mentioned concerning ذهب جمهور العلماء, that majority of the ulama ذهب take the position إلى اشتراط, that they have certain condition يشترط سجود التلاوة some certain conditions. Of those conditions that are discussed, that they tahara. So the question is it a condition for a person who is performing sujood at-tilawa that he must be in a state of tahara? Jumhur of the ulama, and regards to that, outside of salat. So salat is somewhat clear. If the person is within the salat, then it is required. We're now discussing more outside salah. If the person is reciting Quran and he reached a point outside salat, is it a condition that the person must be in a state of tahara to make sujood at-tilawa. So you're concerned, so Jumhur of the ulama, they place it as a condition. Jumhur of the ulama place as a condition being in a state of tahara. For example, in most cases, you might find a person who's reciting that he's in a state of tahara. Even though there's a discussion between ulama regarding reciting the Quran, does the person need to be in a state of tahara, having wudu? And we discussed that topic before. But most people, in most cases, will be in a state of tahara. But you might find a case that may apply more so the person who somewhat is listening to someone else read, but he's not in a state of tahara. And that person read one of the verses of sujood. Now that person who's listening is not the one reading, but he's listening. He's there. Is it a requirement that he should be in a state of tahara before he can make sujood tilawa? So this matter we mentioned, Jumhur does take the position the person must be in a state of tahara. So this is what their condition, as they see, they say that they classify that sujood tilawa, it is a salah. They consider it to be a salat, so it carries the rules and the ahkam of salah. And of the condition of salat is tahara. So it's a sujood tilawa, it requires, as salat requires tahara, sujood tilawa also requires this. Even though Imam Bukhari rahimahullah in his Sahih, he mentioned a athar and Ibn Umar ta'liqan that mentioned أنه كان يسجد على غير وضوء. Athar and Ibn Umar أنه Ibn Umar كان يسجد على غير الوضوء. So Ibn Umar used to make sujood tilawa not in a state of tahara. And this is the view taken by of the ulama who are of that view, as Sa'id ibn Musayyib. Also is the view of Imam Bukhari, the view of Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, and of the ulama of contemporary times, of our contemporary time, Shaykh Muqbil ibn Hadi al-Wa'di, Shaykh Abdul Aziz bin Baz, and also Shaykh ibn Salih ibn Uthaymeen. That shares that view that the person, that is not a condition for a person to make sujood tilawa, that he must be in a state of tahara. Is not conditional. So the person not in a state of tahara, he can make sujood tilawa. As we said, the example will be the person who's listening to someone read, but that the listener is not in a state of tahara. If the imam, the reciter prostrate, then he is allowed to prostrate along with him, because it is not a requirement that the person has to be in a state of tahara. That's the first of the matter. The second, because of the matter of those of the ulama who classify that sujood tilawa is a salah. So if the condition of salah, they also apply the same. Of the other thing they mentioned, istiqbal al-qibla. The person should be in sujood tilawa is a requirement. The person have to face the qibla in doing so, because it's a sujood. And normally sujood is done facing the qibla, which is in salah. So anytime the matter concerning sujood is mentioned in Islam, it is normally related to the person the person facing the qibla, which is mainly in salah. But this sujood on its own, the person reciting the Quran in his house or in the masjid, but he's not in the does he need to face the qibla when he intends to make sujood tilawa outside the salah? So this is outside the salah. The salat, it is clear. So they mentioned that Jumhur again of the ulama do place as a condition that one must be in a state of, must face the qibla in carrying out sujood tilawa. Meaning if you don't do so, your tilawa is not valid. That's the first. Even though you have some of the ulama who does not place it as a condition. Of the ones we mentioned before, that Ibn Hazm, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Uthaymeen, Shaykh Muqbil, and others who do not view concerning it's a must that the person need to face the qibla in performing sujood tilawa. So if the person choose any direction the person choose to make this sujood, it is valid. It's not conditional that one has to face the qibla, but it is always preferable to do so, to face the qibla if the person is able, but it's not conditional. It's not